Okay.
Hello, today with us is Leah, and she will represent herself. Hello.
Hello. My name is Leah Teicher. I am historian. My PhD research dealt with um, another area, but for the last 30, 20 years, I'm doing a big, deep research on Rovno. Rovno was the hometown of my mother-in-law.
I
She
see.
lost her family, all her family, in the woods of Susenki.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, I'm leading in Kihila Links, which is it was a sub site of the Jewish Gen, which deals with commemorations of many, many Jewish towns. Among them is Rovno. In many places in the world, in Europe, in America, and
Mm-hmm.
in Russia, the USSR before, and uh, the Austro-Hungarian Empire rule. Um, that's it, and I got many, many pictures and memories, and people wrote to the Kila links. And last several months, people sent me other materials concerning Rovno, which they discovered after their parents passed away.
I see. And for how long are you researching already, Rovno? How long?
I'm I wanted so much to know about my mother-in-law's life. She
Mm-hmm.
won't tell anything about her life during the war. After, we knew everything, but before, she wouldn't stop talking about
Mm-hmm.
her youth, about her childhood, about her parents, her brother and sister, and all was in humor. She was
Mm-hmm.
laughing and telling jokes about them and of them. And
Mm-hmm.
she told us a lot about their characters, what they do, what they had done, the relationship at home, and she told us a lot about her uncles and aunts. And she won't let me sit down and tell the whole story when the war started in June 41.
I see.
Uh, she gave an interview and a video interview and to Yad Vashem. There
Mm-hmm.
was a lady here, one of our friends. She was here for 1 hour, and it is in Yad Vashem.
I see.
But the beginning of telling what happened to her during the war was when my eldest son had bar mitzvah. And in
Mm-hmm.
Israel, the bar mitzvah boys and girls have to have a little research about their family. She sat down with my eldest son with the atlas,
I
with the
see.
maps of Rovno
Mm-hmm.
to the east, all the towns and rivers and mountains and valleys she passed until she went to Tashkent and Bukhara. In Tashkent, she met my father-in-law. He also uh, escaped from Poland, from Ukraine, South Ukraine, from the area of Kolomea, which is
Mm-hmm.
now in Ukraine also. And this was the first time she put a pencil, all the route she passed from Rovno, and
Mm-hmm.
then came a story how she went away. She finished high school. She was just by the end of the year of high school, and her mother put on her a fur coat
Mm-hmm.
in June with a very nice necklace, high heels, and she said, "Okay, if you want to visit your friend in Kiev, go to Kiev." Who would let a girl of 18 years old
Mm-hmm.
on 1941 to go alone by train to go to Kiev alone with
Mm-hmm.
no with someone not near her? And I think that her mother, the grandmother of my husband and my sister-in-law, she knew something that she probably was very smart and very sharp in her mind, because she had other two kids elder than my mother-in-law, and both of them have had little kids, 1.5 year, 2 years old babies, and she let her go. And her brother, my mother-in-law's brother, was in the ghetto with his wife and little boy of almost 2 years old, and then perished in the woods of Susenki. Her entire family was killed in Susenki, probably in other places. But I did find dozens of members of the family who still were living in the ghetto half year after all were shot on the beginning of November, 6 to 9. And then during the years, from genealogy part and to start knowing her family, every time she mentioned I had an uncle, I said, what was his name? What did he do?
I
Who
see.
were his kids? Little pieces of paper, which I have still today, even in napkins, in weddings, in family affairs. She said, I had a cousin, her name was Lily. I loved her very much. That's why I called my daughter. Her name is also Leah. I decided to call her Lily after my cousin. I knew she didn't come back from Susenki Woods. And so these little pieces of papers put a big story, which we know now about her family, like the Baharal family, the Charonses family, Finkelstein, and other Ehrlich. I told you, dozens of family members were there doing all kinds of jobs for the Germans. I didn't find her sister, though I do not know her surname, family name, after she got married, but we have one picture. And one of the, I have to say that she was she was fond, she was in love with her eldest brother. He was very intelligent, and he studied in Tarbut school.
Yeah.
And in Tarbut,
Mom,
and knew Hebrew. Yes.
Mom, just a second. I just wanted to jump in. I'm the granddaughter.
Nice to meet
I
you.
heard you. Nice to meet you too. I heard you so far, but I couldn't have my video because my son was going to sleep. So I'm just want to say hi, and I'm listening. I would not be able to because of my son, but I'm listening, and it's fascinating even for me to hear all that stuff about my grandma. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Mom, for telling.
Thank you. So, what was your what was the name, family name of your mother-in-law? So you've shared a lot about her.
Gorenstein. She was Gorenstein, Melamed. And probably, as you said, you advised me to think that Melamed, I knew there were 3 Gorenstein families in Rovno. That's what she said. Because sometimes we saw in the pages of testimony, pages of testimony of Yad Vashem, Gorenstein, she said, he is not our family, he is not our family. And I called these people, the one who gave the testimony, and they said, no relation. And I found out that she was right, that there were 3 families. The minute I saw in the Susenki, in the there is a list of 5,000 Jews who were killed in the ghetto. This paper was made by the Judenrat.
Yeah,
on,
I know. I know.
January 15. So the minute I saw the Melamed, I said, I've never seen it. I've never seen, but all through the pages in Facebook that you keep sending, I came to the conclusion that she was right, there were no other families Gorenstein with the name Melamed. So probably one of the ancestors of my mother-in-law was a teacher, and they wanted to differentiate this family from the other two families. And
Okay.
here comes genealogy. My husband and my sister-in-law both were high school principals.
Okay, can I share some documents I have already found for your family? Can I share?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. So I will
yes.
share the
True, it's
screen.
true.
This is my husband.
It's true what
Nice to meet
she's
you.
saying.
I'm
Good
telling
evening.
about Ellie's mother.
Oh,
Okay,
Yes.
okay. So here here we have a Segal family, the one I found for Segal Mayer. This is your relative, let us put it this way, the doctor Segal.
Sigal Meir.
Yes,
I don't know her.
and Segal Brucha and Segal Boris. Boris was their son. So
Yes.
he was the one.
Segal.
Yes,
Segal. Yes.
yes. So
Yes,
and
I know.
so this is the that was their family. I'm just trying to make it okay. Okay, let us put it this way. Okay, here we are, Gorenstein, Melamed, El,
Yes.
and Zlata. Yeah, so that's the, so she was Zlata, so those were,
Zlata was my mother-in-law's mother.
I see. And she was born in Rafalovka. So she when
Yes,
she
that's
came
what
to, yeah, so she came to Rovno, and he was from
Yes.
Rovno. Yes, Gorenstein Melamed.
Yes.
And somehow they were registered in Olika. Just
Why?
I have no
I
just no idea why they've decided to register there. And Finkelstein, that's another part of your family from Lubomel.
Yes.
They're from Lubomel. So
Yes.
they came to Rovno. They were not apparently they were not living in Rovno originally, but many families they came to Rovno later in the 90s because the Rovno was becoming the bigger city. So they've decided that it's easier probably to live in and find a job and things like that. So that's the Finkelstein Sarah. And who is she for you? Sarah?
Sarah Finkelstein
Yeah.
was the aunt of my grandmother, of Manya, Miriam Gorenstein. She was her aunt, sister of her father.
I see. And another one we found, Gorenstein Melamed
My
Moshe.
mother is Melamed Moshe was her father. And Sarah Finkelstein was his sister.
Okay, so that's that. So they were registered in Olika in 1915 and born in Rovno in 1859.
Who,
And
Moshe?
yeah, it said that Gorenstein Melamed Moshe.
Yes,
Yes.
Moshe, I'm sorry, was the grandfather of my mother-in-law.
Yeah. Yes.
Her father was Eliyahu. My husband is named after him.
Yes, and his parents were Yankel and Brendla. So he was born in Rovno, but somehow they registered the family in Olika for some reason. That's why sometimes it's difficult to find the documents because people are for unknown reason they would put sign themselves in all around the Rovno area. So actually it's not that, and you probably also know that it's not easy to deal with with the documents itself. But anyway, I think the next time we will meet,
Victoria, I'm asking, sorry that I'm interrupting you,
yeah,
but maybe they register in Elika because of money, because they have to pay more in Rovno than in Elika for the papers to get registered.
I honestly, I don't know. Honestly, I think
You
the
don't know
next,
the reason.
the next time we will meet, I hope you will share the pictures that you have, the photos,
Yes.
and
yes.
we will know, we'll see your family in face.